In our last two lectures for this course, the main topics of discussion were food waste and climate change. So starting off with food waste, we discussed the importance and prevalence of food waste around the world today. Countries today are directing a significant portion of funds to food processing and food production, obviously to feed their large populations. However, many of the resources that are being depleted, such as water and land for food production, are just being depleted for no reason because so much of the food that we are producing and processing is being wasted. According to the article that we read in class, North American consumers throw out around 23% of the food that enters our households. And while this trend is prevalent in well-off communities, other countries where a lot of their population is living in poverty, these people don't have access to a secure source of food. And those that do have access to food are still suffering from nutrient deficiencies because their food isn't diverse enough to give them all the necessary nutrients to survive. Ultimately, reducing food waste and developing a plan to distribute diverse nutritional foods throughout the world will increase nutrition security and will allow us to just live more sustainable lives. For the second lecture, we had to read two articles that had kind of different takes on warming temperatures and global climate change. So that first article that we read was a news article that discussed how some of the hottest global temperatures recorded occurred in 2023, this past year, and that's supposed to demonstrate the rapid increase in temperature. This seemed like a piece that was written to invoke emotions of urgency, passion, and fear in the reader's minds and urge them to take action. The second piece, on the other hand, was an opinion piece that focused less on the urgency of climate change and more on the trust in humans to be able to adapt to changing global conditions. And while the author seemed to be downplaying changing climate conditions, he instead talked about the importance of human innovation to handle the issue, which I didn't completely agree with his take. Because he discussed the issue of climate change in a way that was downplaying the issue, but I think hearing his perspective was very eye-opening to an extent and gave me a more optimistic view on humans' ability to withstand climate change. Speaking of innovation, my own major, genetics and genomics, can be applied to innovation for climate change. So as temperatures are rising and climate conditions are changing, certain crops are unable to thrive in regions that they previously were able to. However, by genetically modifying crops, creating GMOs, we can make these crops able to withstand extreme weather conditions and ensure food security stays as stable as it is now, or maybe even more stable. Also, on the topic of climate change, I found a science article discussing the effects of transportation on climate change. According to this article, 26% of global greenhouse gas emissions are due to transportation. I also found an interesting figure in the article depicting the percent of energy sources for transportation, as well as the different types of transportation that we rely on today. So figure A is depicting the different energy sources that we get fuel from for transportation. And as we can see in this figure, oil accounts for 97% of where we get the energy from, whereas renewables only account for less than 0.5%. Now, there is a possibility that this figure is a little bit misleading. Pie charts tend to be. However, with the percentages there, you can see that most of what our transportation is fueled by is oil. Looking at figure B, we can see that we mostly rely on road travel versus other forms of travel like rail, like on trains or different pipelines. I think this is a major contributor to the greenhouse gas emissions because if we were to take more public transportation, like in the form of trains, that would be less greenhouse gases being emitted versus everyone having their own car and driving themselves around.